I have known Elliot Carn, the Duke of Kelmore, since we were 7 years old. I have seen him ride into a burning stable to pull out a groom's mare. I have seen him sit at his mother's deathbed and not blink. I have seen him fight 2 duels and lose not a single night's sleep over either. But I had never, in 30 years of friendship, seen him go still the way he went. Still the morning, the plasterers found that letter. It was the east wing of Kelmore Park, the old schoolroom, where the 2 of us had once spent half our childhoods escaping our respective tutors. They were replastering a section of the wainscoting, crumbling, long overdue, when one of the men pulled back a loose panel and found, tucked inside the wall cavity, a folded square of paper gone brown at the edges. He brought it to Elliot, who was overseeing the works in the corridor. I was there. I saw him open it. He read it once, very quickly, the way a man skims a business document. Then he read it again, slower. Then he stood completely still for a long moment, and I watched something move across his face that I had not seen there in a very long time. Something raw and young and badly hurt. "What is it?" I said. He handed it to me without a word. The handwriting was a boy's, uneven, pressing too hard on the downstrokes, the way boys of 12 write when they are trying to seem older than they are. The ink had faded to the color of autumn bracken, but the words were still perfectly legible. "Dear Mira," it said, "I know you are leaving tomorrow. My father says your aunt has sent for you, and this is that, and I am not allowed to ask him to stop it. I am writing this because I cannot say it out loud. I think you are the bravest and the cleverest person I have ever met, and I think this house will be very empty without you. And I think if I were older and had any say in anything at all, I would not let you go. I have put this in the wall because I cannot give it to you. I am sorry I am a coward. Please be well, Elliot." I read it twice, handed it back, and said nothing for a moment. Mira Ashby, the steward's orphaned niece, who had lived at Kelmore from the age of 7 until 12, when a maiden aunt in London had sent for her and taken her away. A quiet, dark-eyed girl who had corrected Elliot's Latin without being asked and beaten us both soundly at chess every wet afternoon for 5 years. He had not spoken of her in 2 decades. I had assumed, as one does, that she had simply dissolved into memory, the way childhood companions do. I had assumed wrong. "Where is she?" I asked. "I don't know," he said. He folded the letter and put it in his breast pocket, and that was the end of the conversation in the corridor. But that evening I found him in the library with a glass of brandy he hadn't touched and a London directory open across his knee. And I understood that the question he'd said he didn't know the answer to had become the only question that mattered. I am a man of practical inclinations. I told him to put the directory down and let me handle it. It took me 3 weeks and 2 inquiry agents, Mira Ashby, now Mira Lorne, having briefly married and been widowed by a cloth merchant of Southwark, was employed as a senior seamstress at a dressmaker's establishment near Covent Garden. Was 32 years old. She was, by the account of the second inquiry agent, who had gone to rather more trouble than I'd asked him to, still dark-eyed, still quiet, and still, apparently, the most competent person in any room she entered. I went to London myself. I did not tell Elliot I was going. I found her at the end of a long workroom, sitting very straight at a table covered in dove-gray silk, guiding a needle through a seam with the particular unhurried precision of someone who has made peace with exactly the life she has. She looked up when I introduced myself, and I watched her go quite still for a second in which she clearly placed my name, placed Kelmore, placed what it meant that I was standing in front of her. "Is he well?" she asked. "Not hello, not what do you want."
Is he well?
"He is," I said. "He has recently found something that belongs to you." I gave her the letter. She read it, sitting very still, the gray silk bunched under her hands. She read it the same way Elliot had, quickly, then slowly, then a third time, her lips pressed together. When she looked up, her eyes were bright, and she was working hard to keep her expression steady, and she was not entirely succeeding. "He was 12, she said. "Yes, and he put it in the wall." "He did." She was quiet for a moment. "He could have written to me. When he was older. When he had any say in anything at all, to use his own phrase." "I rather think," I said, "that he believed, as young men often do, that the moment had passed, that you had moved forward, that offering a letter from a 12-year-old self would only embarrass you both." She looked at the paper in her hands. "He would have been wrong about that." "Yes," I said, "he would." She came to Kelmore 6 days later. I met her carriage at the gate and walked her up the drive myself. Through an October afternoon, that smelled of wood smoke and cold grass, the park amber and copper around us. I had told Elliot only that I had found her, and that she to return the letter in person, and I had watched him spend 4 days in a state of barely controlled composure that would have been amusing if it had not been so plainly agonizing. I brought her to the old schoolroom. I had suggested it, and neither of them had objected, which told me everything. The replastering was finished, the wainscoting restored, the room smelling of fresh lime and old beeswax. Elliot was already there when we arrived, standing at the window with his hands behind his back, staring out at the kitchen garden, the way a man stares at something he is not seeing. He turned when we came in. I will not pretend I did not watch. I am only human. They looked at each other across the length of that room for what felt like a very long time. A tall, brooding man of 32 who had spent 2 decades building a wall as solid as the one he'd hidden his boyhood heart behind, and a dark-eyed woman of the same age who had lived quietly and well and carried the particular composure of someone who has learned to ask nothing from the world. 2 people who had last stood in this room as children, on the morning one of them was sent away. Elliot spoke first. He crossed the room, stopped a few feet from her, and held out his hand. In it was the letter. "I believe this is yours," he said. "I should have given it to you 20 years ago. I am sorry it took the walls of this house falling apart to manage it." Mira Lorne looked at the letter, and then she looked at him, and there was a long moment in which the room was very quiet, just the distant sound of rooks in the elms and the settling of the old house around us. "I would have written back," she said, "if you'd given it to me." He breathed in. "Once, I know that now. Do you?" she said, not unkindly. "Because I rather think you knew it then, too. I think that's why you put it in the wall instead." He was quiet for a moment. Then, slowly, something crossed his face that I recognized. The expression of a man who has just had the exact truth said to him by the only person he would accept it from. "Yes," he said, "I did know it." She took the letter from his hand. Their fingers touched briefly, and neither of them moved away. I took that as my cue to find the door. I waited in the corridor for a long time. Long enough for the rooks to fall quiet and the light to shift. When the door finally opened and Mira came out, she was not composed in the way she had been when I'd found her in London. Carefully settled, kept. She was composed in a different way, lighter, as though something that had been held taut for a long time had finally quietly let go. "He wants you to stay for dinner," she said, "if that is convenient." "It is extremely convenient," I said. She smiled at that, a real smile, quick and warm, the kind that changes a face entirely. I thought, not for the first time in 3 weeks, that the second inquiry agent had been right. She was still the most competent person in any room she entered. I had known Elliot Carn, the Duke of Kelmore, for 30 years. I had seen him lose nothing that mattered. But I had also seen him spend 20 of those years without knowing he had misplaced the thing that mattered most, a single folded square of paper, and the dark-eyed girl it had been written for. He did not misplace her again.